morning. Welcome to Gayton Elementary School. I'm Mrs. Karkosak, and this is my 4th grade class. And we're happy today to have you join us for a lesson on Virginia studies. All right, boys and girls, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to pick up with our studies from yesterday, where we talked a little bit about the diversity and how Jamestown and Virginia was beginning to change. We looked at the arrival of Africans in 1619 and the women when they came, the English women to Jamestown in 1620. And today we're going to look at the roles of some of the people that were at Jamestown. I want to start today by taking a look at this graph. And before we start doing any Plickers questions on the graph, can somebody tell me what the title of the graph is? Thomas?
Virginia population 1607 to 1690.
Very good. Does anybody know what population means? What's population, Carson?
How much people are in that area?
That's right. So we're looking at how many people were in Virginia from 1607 to 1690. What does our y-axis tell us? Carson? Harrison?
The numbers of how many people were there.
The numbers of people. And if you look, we're going by intervals of how many. We have 10,000, 20,000, 30,000. Class, what are we going by?
10,000.
We're going in intervals of 10,000. And we look down at our x-axis. What are we looking at along here? What's our information on our x-axis? Peyton?
The different years.
We're good. And we're going by years from 1607 to 1610, and then we go in increments up to 1690. All right, so taking a look, now that we understand the data in our graph, let's look a little bit back to how Jamestown and Virginia were changing. I'm going to ask you a question. You have a copy of the graph on your desk. The first question I'm going to have for you that you're going to answer with your Plickers cards is, why does this graph start in 1607? What's significant about that year? Why is that an important date? So let me put your question up. Get your Plicker card ready. Did you hit live view? There we go. So why does the graph's data begin with the year 1607? Is that because it was the year Columbus discovered America? Is that because it was the year Powhatan became the chief of the Powhatan tribe? Or is it because it was the year Jamestown was established? When you're ready, remember to turn your card to your letter choice and I'll scan you. As soon as you see your name pop up, you can put it down. All right, we should have everybody in. Miss Gwyneth, and we are Sophie. There you are. All right, let's take a look at the graph. Everybody pretty much agrees. 2 people think it was the year Columbus. Remember, Columbus was 200 years before Jamestown, right?
Yeah.
Almost 200 years. So it was actually the year Jamestown was established. So if we take a look back at our graphs, and look again, notice in 1607, what does the population in Jamestown look like? In Virginia, I should say. There's barely any population there, right? All right, let's go to our next question then. Tell me now, what do you notice? According to this graph, is the population in Virginia increasing over time or decreasing? From 1607 to 1690, looking at your graph, tell me, is it increasing or is it decreasing? When you see your number pop up. All right. You see the check by your name, I've got you. You can put your Plicker card down. Sophie, can you move your fingers, honey? The other finger too. There you go. All right. Can you move your fingers a little, Leah? There we go. All right, who are we missing? Gabby is not here, and Thomas, right in front of me, Thomas, I missed you. All right. All right, so what do we all agree with? Most of us agree that it's increasing, and a couple people say decreasing. How do we know it's increasing if we look at our graph? How do we know it's increasing, Reeves?
Because the number of the population is growing.
That's right, the bar is getting higher. Why do we think that the population is growing? What is happening? Look at from the year 1640. About how many people are in Virginia in 1640? This is about 30 years after Jamestown started. Yes.
There are like a little bit over 10,000.
A little over 10,000 people. And then we get to 1690. All right, that's not that far away. That's only about 50 years away. How many people are in Virginia in 1690? Madeline? Little over 50,000 people. So we go from a little over 10,000 to over 50,000 people in a very short period of time. Why is the population growing so quickly and going up, 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 up? What's happening? Yes, Isaac.
They're sending more people over.
Okay, more people are coming. They're coming for opportunities in Virginia. Yes.
They're sending more women.
More women are coming.
They are getting more slaves from Africa.
More slaves are being brought in from Africa. That's right, because what's booming in Virginia? What's our cash crop? Green gold. Trip. Tobacco, that's right. So they're starting to bring more and more people in. Yesterday we talked about the first arrival of Africans that came in 1619. We said that we weren't sure if they were treated as servants or slaves. Some people believe that because they baptized them on the ship, that they were possibly treated as servants. And we know in this time period that there were lots of people starting to come from Europe. Remember, we're not just one colony, we're 11 settlements now, okay? We have people living all over different parts of Virginia, and the tobacco crops are booming and they need people to work the plantations and the farms, okay? So we talked again yesterday that we were going to examine a little bit about indentured servants. Let's talk about an indentured servant because today we're going to compare and contrast indentured servants to slaves so that we can understand what their roles were in the colony, how they were the same, and how they were different. We're going to begin by listening to a primary resource. Can somebody tell me what a primary resource is? Does anybody remember? Tommy?
A primary resource is something that was documented or drawn by someone who was there.
That's right. So the first piece of our lesson is we're going to actually listen to an account by an indentured servant living in Virginia in this time period and writing home to her father in England. And she's going to talk about what her life is like. Now, indentured servants were people that were generally of poor status. They were offered a free ride to the New World if they agreed to work for a family for 5 to 7 years. And at the end of 5 to 7 years, they were given their freedom. Now, what was their life like during those 5 to 7 years? That's what we're going to learn about today. We'll begin by listening to this account from this young lady living in Virginia who arrived as an indentured servant. And then we have a song that was written in the time period about what it was like to be an indentured servant as well. Can a song be a primary resource?
Yes.
If it was written in the time period by a person experiencing it, absolutely. All right, so what I'm going to ask you to do while you're listening to this young woman's letter home, and then following along and reading along with the lyrics to the distressed damsel, you have a Venn diagram on your desk. On here, I want you to just record some facts about an indentured servant. We're not going to touch her slave side. We're not going to compare them yet. All right, right now we're finding what's different about them. So if you hear little things about an indentured servant, interesting facts, you can jot them down there. Questions? Reeves?
This isn't a question, but I didn't get the lyrics.
Okay. Thomas?
I didn't get the
All right. And you need the Venn diagram.
Yeah.
All right. We're coming. All right. We'll go ahead and press play when we finish passing out to you. Here, I'll switch with you. I'll get these done.
Many men, women, and children in Europe were so poor that they sold themselves into indentured servitude to pay for their passage by ship to America. Once there, they had to work 3 to 7 years for the person or family who bought their contract. They were often treated harshly and forced to live in terrible conditions. Elizabeth Spriggs, an indentured servant, wrote in 1756 to her father in England.
Oh, dear father, believe what I am to relate, the words of truth and sincerity, and then I am sure you'll pity your distressed daughter. What we unfortunate English people suffer here is beyond the probability of you in England to conceive. Let it suffice that I, one of the unhappy number, am toiling almost day and night, and very often in the horse's drudgery, and then tied up and whipped to that degree that you not serve an animal, scarce anything but Indian corn and salt to eat, almost naked, no shoes nor stockings to wear, and the comfort after slaving during master's pleasure. What rest we can get is to wrap ourselves up in a blanket and lie upon the ground. This is the deplorable condition your poor Betty endures.
All right, boys and girls, hearing that letter home, what are some things that jump out to you? How does she describe her life? Delaney?
Of how she does not like working for whoever she's working for.
Right, and she uses the word toil. What does anybody know what toil means? She says I toil all day from sun up to sundown. What does it mean to toil? Gwyneth?
I think it means she was suffering, she was miserable.
Yeah, she was miserable, she was suffering. And again, this is an actual letter written by an actual indentured servant home to England from Virginia. How else does she describe her life?
Harsh.
Harsh. And we know that that word means it was extremely difficult. Does she eat a lot? Does she have a lot to eat?
No.
Where does she sleep? Do you remember at the end where she said? Yes.
She sleeps in a blanket on the hard ground.
Right, she sleeps on the floor with a blanket. So it doesn't sound like she has a very good life, does it? All right, let's follow along to the song also written about the indentured servant. And when they refer to somebody as master, it's almost now when we say Mr., like Master Guy means Mr. Guy is the name of who she's working for.
5 years served I under Master Guy in the land of Virginia, which made me for to know sorrow, grief, and woe. When that I was weary, oh.
Are kind of the same because indentured servants work for someone, so do slaves, but the indentured servants don't exactly have to do the same things the slaves do.
Okay, and we're going to examine that a little deeper when we come to our slave narrative, but let's back up a little bit. What can you tell me about an indentured servant's life?
An indentured servant has a bed,
Well, did she have a bed? Where did she say she slept?
on the ground.
On the ground with a blanket, right? All right, how long does she say that she served under Master Guy? Yes.
For 5 years.
Yes, and generally indentured servants served 5 to 7 years. And what happened at the end of that, boys and girls? Lisabella?
She was set free.
They were set free. It was a contract that said, I'll pay for you to get on the boat to come to the New World, but you have to work for me for 5 to 7 years to pay it off. At that end of the time, they were free. And a lot of times they might be given a little piece of land or some seeds or corns to start a farm with. So they were in a pretty good place. It was a hard place to be, though, right? What does she mean by I've played my part both at plow and cart? Yes. Gwen?
It means she planted and she I don't know, maybe she put, never mind.
No, it's okay. Go ahead. Did you lose your thought?
Yeah.
All right. When she talks about her dame, by dame, she means the female of the house. She says, when she says go, then I must do so. When she sits at meat, I have none to eat. Is she eating well? No. And at the very end, she says, let all maids beware. A maid is a unmarried young woman. She's speaking back to the women in Europe and England. That by my ill fare, she doesn't mean sick, she means a bad place to be in the land of Virginia. Stay away, for if you came, I say, you will be weary, weary, weary. Weary means tired. She's worked very hard, correct?
Yes.
All right. All right, when we shift gears, we're looking at people that are coming from Africa that are being brought over against their will. They're not signing a contract. They're not making a choice to load on a boat and go move to a new country and lead a different life. All right? They don't have a contract for 5 to 7 years. And the narrative that we're going to listen to is from a slave woman talking about what she would do for an opportunity for freedom. And then afterwards, we're also going to listen to a song, and some of you might have heard this song before. This is actually a song that they sometimes still play. Who's ever heard of Nobody Knows the Trouble I've Seen? All right, well, again, we're going to examine those lyrics, and I want you, if you haven't put anything down on your Venn diagram, remember we're thinking and jotting, listening and jotting, to be putting down your observations and thoughts about slaves. And at the end, we'll come together with our partners and compare. How are they the same as indentured servants, but how are they different? Because there is a big difference. All right, we ready to put our listening ears on?
The first people to be enslaved in the colonies were Native Americans. From Canada to the West Indies, Native American slave labor became a thriving business. The slaves, however, often escaped or were rescued by members of their tribes. Many died from European diseases or overwork. As the colonies grew, the demand for slaves could not be met with the ever-declining native population. Indentured servitude filled the gap for a time, but the trade of slaves from Africa proved far more profitable, and gradually, the number of indentured servants declined as the number of African slaves increased. There are thousands of reports of African slave resistance and heroic efforts to gain liberty. Among later generations born into slavery, the desire for freedom remained a constant yearning. Mom Brett, born a slave in the Massachusetts colony, recalls,
Anytime while I was a slave, if 1 minute's freedom had been offered to me, and I had been told I must die at the end of that minute, I would have taken it just to stand 1 minute. I would have taken it just to stand 1 minute on God's earth, a free woman.
All right, so again, we hear the difference in the narrative. What is she saying in her narrative? Yes.
She just wants to be free, and if she doesn't care if she dies.
That's right.
She doesn't want to have to work any longer.
That's right. Isabella?
She'd rather die than be a slave forever her life.
She would trade 1 minute of freedom, right, to be able to have 1 moment of free choice and free will. Reeves?
She wouldn't care if her owner or the person she works for kills her, because she would give her life just to be free.
Give her life for freedom. Okay.
One worked for 7 years and one worked for their whole life.
There we go. That is the greatest difference. Did they both live in bad conditions?
Yes.
Were they both not treated very well?
Yes.
Okay. But one, the indentured servant, it was 5 to 7 years, and then they were free. Were the slaves ever set free?
No.
Rarely. Took 200 years. 200 years, kids, before that happened. What else is very different about working for 5 to 7 years and working forever? Carson?
One took a lot more time, and the other got to be free, and the other one still works for the whole entire life.
That's right. That's a big difference in time. But there's one more understanding I want you to have about this. Gwyneth?
There were more slaves than indentured servants.
Yes, at a certain point in history, there were over 4 million slaves. Yes, and there were more.
That slaves didn't sign a contract to go.
Bam! Did you hear that? What? Say it again.
The slaves didn't sign a contract to go to Virginia.
Choice.
They were forced.
Choice. That's it right there, boys and girls. It's choice. Thank you for joining our class today on our lesson on comparing and contrasting the roles of slaves and indentured servants in Virginia history.
Go!